I never believed in fate until the moment I looked up from the pastry case and found a pair of storm gray eyes already watching me, steady and unapologetic. Like the rain outside had decided to come indoors and stare right through me. They say you remember exactly where you were the first time. Your life quietly ordered, life cracked open, and let the light in. For me, it was a Thursday in late November, inside Bean and Leaf on Alberta Street. The windows fogged with condensation and the air thick with cinnamon-browned butter, and the low hum of people pretending they weren't lonely. My name is Elliot Harper, and this is the story of how one reckless second of eye contact rewrote everything I thought I knew about wanting. The rain that morning had been biblical, Portland doing its level best to drown the city in melancholy. I'd sprinted the last 2 blocks from the bus stop, coat flapping like a broken wing, my canvas messenger bag soaked through and slapping against my hip. I was 31, a children's book illustrator who still hadn't quite figured out how to be an adult, still paying off art school debt with watercolor rabbits and anxious foxes. My apartment smelled like turpentine and yesterday's pad thai, and the last person who'd spent the night there had left 6 weeks ago with a polite text that read, "I think we're looking for different things." He wasn't wrong. I just hadn't known what I was looking for until I saw her. She was leaning against the far wall near the pickup counter, one boot propped behind her, arms folded loosely under a faded army jacket 2 sizes too big. Her hair was black and heavy with rain, twisted into a knot that looked like it had been done with impatience rather than care. A few strands had escaped and clung to the sharp line of her cheekbone. She had the kind of face that looked like it had seen some things scar over one eyebrow, faint freckles across the bridge of a nose that had probably been broken once. She wore a burgundy scarf looped twice around her neck and fingerless gloves the color of wet asphalt. In one hand, she held a chipped black umbrella. In the other, a paperback whose spine was cracked in so many places it looked held together by stubbornness alone. I should have looked away. I'd spent 31 years perfecting the art of not staring, of letting my gaze slide past women who made my pulse stutter like a scratched record. Growing up the only out kid in a dying mill town in Pennsylvania had taught me how dangerous longing could be when it showed on your face. But the line was taking forever, and the barista had just called out Elliot oat milk cappuccino, extra foam. And when I stepped forward to claim it, she lifted her eyes from her book and looked straight at me. The room narrowed to the space between us. She didn't smile. She didn't look away. She just studied me the way you study a painting. You're not sure you understand yet, like she was trying to decide whether I was worth the risk of feeling. Something I forgot how to breathe. The air felt suddenly too small for my lungs. The barista had too. Say my name again? I startled, nearly knocked over the tip jar, managed to grab my drink without spilling it across the floor. When I turned back, she was still watching. A slow, crooked smile tugged at one corner of her mouth, the kind that looked like it didn't come easily, and therefore meant more when it did. I should have gone to the corner table I always claimed, the one by the outlet where I could pretend to work while secretly people watching. Instead, my feet carried me toward her like someone else was steering. "Hi," I said, because apparently my brain had taken the morning off. She raised an eyebrow. "You always walk up to strangers and announce your respiratory status? Or am I special?" Her voice was low, a little rough, like she'd spent the night laughing or shouting or singing in some bar I suddenly wished I'd been at. "Special," I said, and then wanted to die, because who says that? But her smile widened, just enough to show a chipped front tooth that somehow made her more beautiful. "I'm Rowan," she said, and held out her hand like we were at a business meeting instead of dripping rainwater onto a coffee shop floorboards. I shifted my cup to my left hand and took hers. Her fingers were cold, calloused at the tips guitar player, maybe, or carpenter. Her grip was firm, unhesitating. "Elliot, I know," she said, nodding toward the cup in my hand where my name was scrawled in purple marker. Elliot with 2 L's and a heart over the I, cute. What heat flooded my face. The barista has a flair for the dramatic. Clearly, she tilted her head. "You always let strangers read your coffee cup, Elliot with 2 L's? only the ones reading Margaret Atwood in a rainstorm. Her laugh was sudden and unguarded, a bright crack of sound that made 3 people look up from their laptops. "Fair," she said. "Though technically, it's a reread. Some books are better when the world feels like it's ending." Outside, thunder rolled low over the city. I don't know how long we stood there talking, long enough for my coffee to go cold, long enough for the line to shrink and swell again. She told me she was a woodworker, that she built custom furniture in a warehouse studio in Southeast, that she'd grown up in Missoula and still missed mountains that didn't apologize for existing. I told her about painting nervous animals for children who probably wouldn't notice the anxiety in the brushstrokes, about growing up queer in a town where the only gay bar was 40 minutes away and only open on weekends. At some point she closed her book. Without marking the page, she knew it by heart. She said and asked if I wanted to get out of there. "It's pouring," I pointed out. "I like the rain," she said. "And I have an umbrella." It was the smallest umbrella in the world. We had to stand close enough that her shoulder brushed my chest every time we took a step. The city smelled like wet asphalt and frying onions from the food carts. We walked without a destination, sharing the umbrella like a secret. She asked about my favorite colored green, like pine needles after rain. I asked about hers, the orange of a struck match right before it catches. When we reached the park at the end of the street, she stopped under the awning of the closed rose garden kiosk and looked at me. "I don't do this," she said quietly. "Do what?" "Pick up cute illustrators in coffee shops. Talk to strangers like I've known them for years." Any of it. I swallowed. "I don't either." "Good," she said, and kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It tasted like espresso and rain, and the kind of wanting I'd spent my whole life pretending I could live without. Her hands slid under my coat, cold fingers against the warm skin of my waist, and I made a sound I didn't know I could make. When we pulled apart, her eyes were wide and dark, pupils blown. "Still breathing?" she asked, voice rough, barely. She smiled again, softer this time. "Come home with me." I did. Her apartment was above her workshop. All exposed brick and sawdust and half-finished tables that looked like sculptures. She made tea while I dripped on her floorboards. Watching her move, sure unself-conscious, like someone who'd long ago decided the world could take her, exactly as she was. We didn't sleep much that night. In the morning, the rain had stopped. Sunlight poured through the skylight and painted gold across her bare shoulder where she lay half on top of me, breath warm against my collarbone. I traced the scar over her eyebrow with one finger. "Bar fight?" I asked. "Softball slide gone wrong?" she murmured. I was 12 and trying to impress a girl. Did it work? She laughed into my skin. Eventually, I thought, this is what it feels like when the world tilts and decides to stay that way. 18 months later, I still think it every morning when I wake up to her making coffee in one of my old t-shirts, or when she brings me sawdust-covered sandwiches in the middle of the day because she knows I forget to eat when I'm painting, or when she falls asleep on the couch waiting for me to finish a deadline. Book open on her chest like nothing has changed and everything has. They say you remember exactly where you were when your life changed forever. I was standing in a crowded coffee shop on a rainy November Thursday, holding a cappuccino I never drank, when a woman with storm gray eyes and a chipped tooth looked at me like I was the answer to a question she'd been carrying for years, and I looked back and the world tilted. Just enough, and it never tilted back. The rain in Seattle never really stops. It just pauses to reconsider. On this particular Tuesday in October, it had decided to commit fully, hammering the windows of Anchorhead Coffee on Pine Street like it had a personal grudge. I was standing in line pretending to study the pastry case when I saw him. He sat in the corner by the exposed brick wall, one boot propped against the legs of the opposite chair. A worn paperback of Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, open on the table in front of him. His hair was dark and a little too long, curling at the collar of a forest green fisherman's sweater that had clearly seen better decades. There was ink on his fingers. Actual ink. Not the metaphorical kind, and a tiny silver hoop in one ear that caught. The light every time he turned a page, he looked like someone who had stepped out of a Pacific Northwest daydream, and accidentally wandered into real life. I ordered my usual oat milk cappuccino. Extra foam on autopilot, paid and drifted toward the pickup counter while trying very hard not to stare. Wade. He underlined something in the margin with a mechanical pencil, then tapped the eraser against his lower lip while he thought. The gesture was so unconsciously intimate I felt like I was intruding. Elliot. My name on the barista's voice startled me so badly I nearly dropped the cup. I grabbed it, muttered thanks, and turned only to discover the shop had filled up while I'd been busy cataloging the exact slope of a stranger's cheekbones. Every table was taken except one tiny two-top, wedged right next to his. Of course, I hesitated in the middle of the floor like an idiot, rain drumming harder against the glass until the sensible part of my brain lost the argument with the reckless one. I slid into the empty chair, angling my body toward my laptop like a normal person who definitely hadn't chosen this seat for proximity reasons. I lasted 7 minutes, 7 minutes of answering emails, pretending I wasn't hyper-aware of the way he smelled cedar and coffee and something faintly like old books. 7 minutes before I risked another glance. He was looking at me. Not casually. Not accidentally. Looking. Dark gray eyes, storm cloud colored. Fixed on me with a calm curiosity that made every nerve ending I owned stand at attention. I should have looked away. Instead, I froze. He smiled small, crooked, devastating, and lifted his book slightly in greeting. Bechtel fan? My brain short-circuited. Yeah. I teach it sometimes. His eyebrows went up, interested. Teach? Graphic narrative seminar at UW Adjunct. I gestured vaguely at myself as if that explained everything. Elliot Shaw, Leo Valdez. He closed the book, but kept a finger between the pages to hold his place. I own the bookstore 2 blocks down. Twice Sold Tales. Everyone in the lit scene knew Twice Sold Tales. The rambling 3-story house on Capitol Hill, stuffed floor to ceiling with used books, 2 resident cats, and the best queer theory section in the city. I'd been inside a dozen times, but somehow, never when he was working. Or maybe I had and just hadn't noticed because I wasn't lost in the stacks. You're Leo? I said too loud. Wait. The Leo who fought the city for 3 years to keep the handwritten queer books, Save Lives mural on the side of the building? He laughed, and the sound was warm and low, and did things to my chest I wasn't prepared for. That would be me. They eventually gave up when I threatened to repaint it every time they buffed it out. How do you know about that? I followed the whole saga on Instagram. I might have donated to the legal fund. His smile widened. Then I definitely owe you a drink. Or at least a staff discount. I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. I was literally just thinking I needed to place a big order for spring semester. If you've got a new shipment of graphic memoirs, we do. I put them out yesterday. He tilted his head. You could come by tonight after we close. I'll still be there doing inventory. I make a decent espresso. And the cat's like an audience. My pulse was doing things that probably required medical attention. Tonight, I repeated, unless you have plans. I absolutely did not have plans. My plans were Netflix, and feeling vaguely sorry for myself because another date had ghosted after the second drink. My plans were absolutely flexible. I could do tonight, I said. Excellent. He pulled a pen from behind his ear. Who even does that? And scribbled something on the margin of his page, then tore the corner off and slid it across the table. My number. Text me when you're close and I'll leave the side door open. Bring an umbrella. The front steps flood. I stared at the scrap of paper like it might bite me. His handwriting was sharp and slanted impatient. "Okay," I managed. He stood, sliding Fun Home into the canvas bag at his feet. Up close, he was taller than I'd realized, and there was a faint white scar that cut through his left eyebrow like someone had tried to erase part of him and failed. He smelled even better standing up. "See you later, Elliot Shaw," he said, and then he was gone, swallowed by the gray afternoon and the sound of the door chime. I looked down at the torn page in my hand. In the margin, he'd written his number, and underneath, a single line, "Page 1127 made me cry in public once." Curious which part gets you. I opened my phone immediately and saved the contact as Leo Twice Sold Tales. Then I sat there for another 20 minutes staring at my laptop without seeing a single word. Rain pouring down the windows, heart ricocheting against my ribs like it was trying to escape and follow him down the street tonight. I had a maybe date with the guy who owned my favorite bookstore, who read Bechtel in coffee shops and fought City Hall with spray paint and stubbornness. I was definitely going to need a better umbrella. The rain that Tuesday in Seattle was the kind that didn't fall so much as hang in the air. Cold silver mist that turned every street lamp into a watercolor bloom. I was hunched over my laptop in slate coffee on Capitol Hill, pretending to finalize a pitch deck while actually nursing the same flat. White for 45 minutes. I'm staring at the man across the room. He had the kind of face that made you forget what you were doing. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it was always half a second from laughing at a private joke, and dark hair that kept falling into his eyes no matter how many times he pushed it back. He was reading a battered paperback of The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, occasionally mouthing lines to himself like he couldn't help it. Every time he turned a page, the sleeve of his forest green sweater rode up just enough to show the edge of a tattoo I couldn't quite make out. I got caught, of course. His eyes flicked up, met mine, held. I should have looked away. I didn't. He smiled, small, crooked. Knowing, and I felt it in my knees, even though I was sitting down. When he stood to leave, I thought that was it. Another beautiful stranger I'd replay in my head for weeks. But he paused at my table, raindrops still clinging to his hair. "You've been watching me for 20 minutes, he said, voice low and amused. "Either I have something on my face, or you're working up the courage to say hello." My mouth went dry. Definitely the second one. "Hi, I'm Elias." "Luca." He tilted his head. "I close my bookstore at 8 on Thursdays. If you're free, I could use a second opinion on some new window displays. And maybe dinner after. No pressure." He wrote his number on the corner of my napkin before I could answer, and walked out into the rain, like he hadn't just rewired my entire nervous system. Thursday took its sweet time arriving. I changed shirts 4 times, finally landing on the charcoal one my sister swore made me look quietly devastating, and showed up at his shop. Page against the machine. At 7:57 p.m., the sign on the door read closed. But the lights were on, and Luca was waiting just inside. Unlocking it the second he saw me, he looked unfairly good. Black jeans. Sleeves of a soft gray Henley pushed to the elbows. That same tattoo, now fully visible, a line of sheet music, curling around his forearm like it had grown there. He smelled like espresso and cedar and something faintly sweet. "You came," he said, like he hadn't been sure I would. "Wild horses, etc." He laughed and let me in. The bookstore was everything I'd imagined and more. 3 stories connected by creaking wooden stairs, exposed brick, plants spilling from every shelf, a record player spinning something soft and French in the background. There were rainbow flags, yes, but also Palestinian keffiyehs draped artfully beside them. Signs about prison abolition next to gorgeous cloth-bound classics. Hand-lettered signs in Luca's slanted handwriting. "Trans people belong here. Fuck cops. Read books. If you steal from us, we understand, but please take the Bibles." Gave me the tour like he was nervous I'd hate it. Pointed out the romance section that took up half the second-floor people, pretend they're embarrassed. But they buy the hell out of them. The tiny poetry stage where he hosted readings every Friday. The children's corner with a miniature velvet sofa and a basket of pronoun buttons. "I wanted to feel like the place I needed when I was 16 and terrified," he said quietly, fingers brushing the spine of Fun Home. "Somewhere you could walk in and immediately know you weren't the only one." He told me about growing up Mormon in southern Utah, About the youth pastor who told him he was going to hell at 14, about finding a dog-eared copy of Aristotle, and Dante discover the secrets of the universe in a little free library and reading it under his covers with a flashlight until the words blurred from crying. I told him about small-town Pennsylvania, about the boyfriend I had senior year who made me swear never to tell anyone, about driving 3 hours to the nearest gay bar and still feeling like I was performing. We stood between the graphic novels and the queer theory, trading scars like kids comparing scabs. And I realized I hadn't breathed this easily in years. Eventually, he ordered pizza from the place next door, Mushroom. An olive for me, before I even said it was my favorite, and we ended up on the floor of the closed shop, backs against a shelf of Octavia Butler, eating out of the box and arguing about whether Radiohead peaked with OK Computer they did or in Rainbows they didn't. But I let him win because he did this thing where he tucked his hair behind his ear when he got passionate, and it was destroying me. At some point, the conversation circled back. So, Lucas said, licking sauce off his thumb in a way that should be illegal at the coffee shop, what exactly was going through your head when you were staring at me? I could have lied. Instead, I said, I was thinking you looked like the kind of person who names his plants and remembers people's birthdays, and that if I didn't at least try to talk to you, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. He went very still. Then he reached over and brushed a piece of hair off my forehead, fingers lingering. Good answer, he whispered. The record had ended. Rain tapped against the skylight 3 stories up. Somewhere below us, a cat I hadn't noticed before jumped onto a stack of hardcovers and began to purr like a motor. Luca leaned in, slow enough that I could have stopped him. I didn't. When our lips met, it felt inevitable. Like every book on every shelf had been waiting for this exact moment. He tasted like pizza and the mints he kept in a jar by the register. His hand found the back of my neck, and I made a sound I'm not proud of but will never regret. We kissed until we were breathless, till the pizza was cold and the cat was judging us. When we pulled apart, foreheads still touching, he laughed softly. I was staring too, you know, he said. I'm just better at subtlety, liar. You smiled at me like you'd won something I had. Kissed me again, quick and certain. I have. We stayed there until almost midnight, trading kisses and stories and the last slightly congealed slice of pizza. When he finally walked me to the door, the rain had stopped and the city smelled like wet pavement and possibility. Thursday again next week? He asked, fingers tangled with mine. Every Thursday, I said, until you get sick of me, he grinned. That same crooked smile from the coffee shop that had ruined me for all other smiles. Elias, he said, I've been waiting for you since I was 16 years old and reading stolen library books under the covers. I'm not getting sick of you. Not ever. He kissed me one more time, soft and slow, then locked the door behind me with a wave through the glass. I walked home through the quiet streets, heart too big for my chest, replaying every second. The mist had lifted and the stars were out, sharp and bright above the city. Something significant had begun. I was brave enough to keep reading. They'd known each other 5 days and it already felt like borrowing someone else's life. One that fit better than the old one ever had. Saturday at 10 sharp, Adrian's Jeep pulled up outside my building. He hopped out before I could reach the curb, circled around, and opened the passenger door like we were in some black and white movie neither of us had agreed to audition for. Morning, he said. Voice still rough from too little sleep and too much anticipation. He was wearing a faded gray Henley, sleeves pushed up, and the kind of jeans that had earned every rip and fade. Simple, but on him it looked deliberate. Morning, I answered, suddenly shy in daylight. Last night we'd had the cover of a closed bookstore and 4 hours of talking to hide behind. Now there was sunshine and nowhere to look but straight at him. He reached for my hand like it was the most ordinary thing in the world, threaded our fingers, and tugged me closer. Still okay with this? He asked, nodding toward the open door. Completely. He kissed me once, quick, soft, promising more later than, let me climb in. The Jeep smelled like coffee and old paperbacks, and something woodsy that was just him. There was a paper cup waiting for me in the console. 2 sugars. Splash of oat milk, he said. I remembered from the cafe. I stared at the cup, then at him. You're making it very hard to stay cool about this, Adrian. Good, he said, grinning as he pulled away from the curb. Cool is overrated. We drove west, out past the city limits. Windows cracked, just enough for the air to whip through and tangle my hair. He'd made a playlist, I could tell, because every song felt chosen, not random. The National, Phoebe Bridgers, a little Bon Iver, When the Trees Got Thick. He sang under his breath on the parts he knew, off-key but unapologetic. And I pretended to watch the scenery while actually watching the way his fingers tapped the steering. Wheel in perfect rhythm. 40 minutes later, he turned onto a gravel service road I'd never have found on my own. The Jeep bounced gently until the trees parted, and suddenly there was the river wide. Glittering impossibly blue, in a view of Mount Hood wearing fresh snow like it had dressed up for us. He killed the engine. We're here. Where exactly is here? Secret spot. My dad used to bring me when I was a kid, and the world got too loud. He grabbed a canvas backpack from the back seat, slung it over one shoulder. Come on. We hiked maybe 10 minutes along a narrow trail that hugged the cliff above the river. He held low branches out of my way, offered his hand on the steep parts without making it feel like help I needed more, like an excuse to keep touching. When the path opened up, there was a flat boulder the size of a living room. Sun warmed and waiting, he unzipped the backpack and started pulling out treasures, a thermos of better coffee, 2 chipped enamel mugs, still warm cinnamon rolls wrapped in parchment, a folded wool blanket the color of Merlot. You planned this, I accused. Delighted? Guilty. He spread the blanket, patted the space beside him. I may have woken up at 5 plotting how to keep you outside city limits as long as possible. We sat shoulder to shoulder, knees touching, eating cinnamon rolls with our fingers and licking frosting off our thumbs while the river rushed below us. He told me about the summers he spent here as a teenager, reading Neruda to the water, pretending the mountains were listening. I told him about the graphic novel I'd been hiding in a drawer for 6 years half finished, terrified it would never be good enough. Show me someday? He asked quietly. Maybe, I said, if you're very, very nice to me. He laughed low and warm. I plan on being extremely nice to you, Nathan. Starting now. Took my sticky fingers, brought them to his mouth, and licked the last of the frosting from my thumb without ever breaking eye contact. The gesture was so unexpectedly filthy and sweet at the same time that heat flashed straight through me. Adrian, I warned. You can't just do that in broad daylight on a rock in the wilderness. Pretty sure I just did. He leaned in, kissed the corner of my mouth where sugar still clung, and you taste better than the cinnamon roll. We kissed like people who'd been starving and only just realized it, slow, then less slow. Hands under shirts, learning the map of each other's ribs and scars and places that made us shiver. When his palm slid just under the waistband of my jeans, I made a sound I didn't know I could make. He pulled back first, breathing hard against my neck. We should slow. I promised myself I'd be good. You're already impossibly good, I told him. It's annoying, he laughed into my shoulder. Come here. We rearranged ourselves, so I was lying with my head in his lap, his fingers combing through my hair while he read to me again. This time from a battered paperback of Mary Oliver he'd tucked in the backpack. The sun moved across the sky and neither of us cared about time. Eventually hunger won. He'd packed sandwiches, roast beef, and horseradish for him. Fig and brie for me because apparently he'd also asked Maya extremely subtle questions yesterday when I was in the bathroom. Trader best friend? The afternoon blurred. More kissing? Trading secrets? Napping tangled together under his jacket when the breeze turned cool? At one point I woke up to find him sketching on the back of the paper bag the sandwiches came in quick. Deft lines of my sleeping face. He tried to hide it when he realized I was watching. Let me see. It's nothing. Rough. I snatched it anyway. He'd caught the exact way my mouth softened when I wasn't guarding it. The fall of hair across my forehead. The small scar through my left eyebrow I got falling off my bike at 12. It was tender and unflinching and better than any photograph he'd drawn. I want to remember what you looked like the first time you let yourself rest around me, he said. Cheeks pink. I kissed him so hard we almost rolled off the boulder. By the time the sun started sliding toward the hills, the air had teeth. He zipped me into his jacket too big, sleeves swallowing my hands, and held me from behind while we watched. The light turned the river gold. I don't want to take you back yet, he murmured against my ear. Then, don't. Not yet. We stayed until the sky, bruised purple, and the first stars came out. He drove home with one hand on the wheel and the other wrapped around mine on my thigh. Like letting go might make the day disappear. When he pulled up outside my building again, it was past 10. The porch light was on. Maya had left it for me like a parent. We sat in the quiet car, engine ticking as it cooled. So, he said. So, tomorrow? He asked, I have to work Monday. I should be responsible at least one day this weekend. He smiled, soft. Then Monday. After work, I'll make you dinner at my place. I'm an acceptable cook when properly motivated. I'll bring dessert, I offered. Bring yourself. That's plenty. Another kiss. This one's slow and deliberate. Like we were memorizing, and then I made myself get out of the car before I invited him up and ruined both our good intentions. He waited until I was inside, waved once through the windshield, and drove off. Maya was waiting. In the kitchen, with 2 mugs of tea and an expression that said she'd been living vicariously through my texts all day. Tell me everything, she ordered. I dropped into the chair across from her, still wearing Adrian's jacket, still able to taste him on my lips. Maya, I said, voice cracking on the wonder of it. I think I'm in the middle of a love story, and I never saw it coming. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Good, she said fiercely. You're overdue. 'Kay. Upstairs, I fell into bed, still wrapped in wool and wood smoke, and the echo of his voice reading poetry against my skin. My phone lit up one last time. ADRIE. In. Home safe. Still tasting you? Monday is 1,000 years away. Nathan, I stole your jacket. Hope that's okay, Tren. Keep it forever if you want. Looks better on you anyway. Adrian, dream of me? Nathan, already am. I fell asleep, smiling like an idiot, the city quiet outside my window. Certain for the first time in years that some stories, the best ones, start exactly when you stop trying to write them yourself. Here's the same story, retold with entirely different characters. A different CD, a different season, and a new emotional texture. Yet keeping the same heartbeat to people on a second date. Falling quietly and irrevocably into each other. His name was Elias Moreau. 34, born in Montreal, now living in Asheville, North Carolina, because the mountains felt like forgiveness. He owned a tiny used record shop wedged between a crystal store and a brewery on Lexington Avenue, a place that smelled of vinyl and cedar and always played something you'd never heard but suddenly needed. I'm Jonah Cohen, 32, children's book illustrator who moved south from Brooklyn 6 months ago. After my divorce papers felt heavier than my suitcases, we matched on an app in late September. His first message was a photo of a 1976 pressing of Joni Mitchell's Hegira with the caption, "Convince me not to spend rent money on this," I wrote back. "Only if you let me draw the cover art on your wall someday." He replied within seconds, "Deal. Coffee tomorrow?" Coffee turned into Thai food, turned into walking the River Arts District until 2 in the morning, turned into him kissing me against a mural of a blue heron while the French Broad rushed past us like it was late for something important. So when he texted on a Golden Friday in November, "I have Saturday off. Want to disappear with me?" I only asked what shoes to wear. He picked me up at 9 a.m. sharp in a dusty bronze Subaru Forester with a cracked side mirror and a pine tree air freshener that had given up years ago. He wore a rust-colored sweater that made his black curls look even wilder and carried 2 travel mugs of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. "I made a playlist," he said, handing me the aux cord like it was a sacred relic. "But you can veto anything." The first song was Big Thief's Mary. I let it play. By the time Adrian Lenker sang about the light falling through the window, we were already climbing out of the city. switchbacking up toward the Blue Ridge Parkway, windows down. Cold air tasting like snow that hadn't decided whether to fall. We didn't talk much at first. Just music and the road and the occasional brush of his hand on my knee when he shifted gears. Then he told me about the customer who came in yesterday demanding every Taylor Swift album on vinyl, but only the ones with bonus tracks, and how Elias spent 45 minutes explaining that Folklore didn't have a cassette version in 2020. I told him about the editor who asked if the bear in my picture book could be less gay. We laughed until our ribs hurt. The way you only laugh when someone finally speaks the ridiculous truth out loud. After an hour, he turned off the parkway onto a Forest Service road barely wide enough for the car. Gravel pinged the undercarriage like light gunfire. "We walk from here," he said, killing the engine. "It's 30 minutes up, maybe 40 if we keep stopping to kiss, which I fully intend to do." He should. He grabbed a backpack and a woven blanket, the color of red wine. I carried the thermos and a paper bag that smelled like still-warm croissants. The trail was steep, carpeted in bronze oak leaves, the air so cold it felt like breathing glass. Every few minutes, he'd wait for me, offer his gloved hand, pull me over a root or a slick patch of mud. His palm was warm even through wool. We broke out above the tree line at a place called Craggy Pinnacle, though Elias called it his church. The mountains rolled out in every direction like God had poured them from a bucket and then changed his mind halfway through. The sky was that impossible November blue that makes you believe in things again. Wind whipped our coats around our legs. He spread the blanket on a slab of granite still warm from yesterday's sun. From the backpack came still warm pain, chocolate. Sharp white cheddar, a jar of fig jam, a bar of 85% dark chocolate, and a tiny bottle of bourbon because he said, "Altitude makes everything taste better." We ate sitting shoulder to shoulder, legs dangling over a drop that would definitely kill us, passing the bourbon back and forth until my lips tingled. "Can I ask you something kind of a big question?" I said, licking chocolate off my thumb. He turned, eyes the color of wet bark. "You can ask me anything, Jonah." "When did you know for sure that you were?" "You?" he exhaled, watching a hawk circle far below us. "I was 11. My cousin Lucy had this friend, Simon, who used to come swimming at the lake in the summers. He had freckles across his nose, and he laughed like the world owed him money. One day he cannonballed right next to me, and when he came up, water streaming off his eyelashes. I thought, oh, this is going to be a problem. My chest felt like someone had poured gasoline in it and handed me the match." He laughed softly. "Took me until 19 to say it out loud. My father didn't speak to me for 8 months. My mother cried for 3 days, then showed up at my apartment with a lasagna and said, 'You will eat and you will let me love you.' And that is final. She still calls me every Sunday." I leaned my head on his shoulder. I was 15. There was this lifeguard at the public pool in Flatbush. Golden skin, red swim trunks, whistle around his neck like a promise. I used to pretend I was drowning just so he'd touch me. Never did drown, obviously. But I think about him every time I smell chlorine. Elias threaded his fingers through mine. "Do you miss New York?" "Parts of it, but I don't miss who I was there. Married to someone who loved the idea of me more than the reality. I woke up one morning and realized I was drawing picture books. It's about brave kids having adventures while I was busy being terrified of my own." He was quiet for a long time. "Then, I'm glad you left, because you're here now." He reached into the backpack again and pulled out a Leica that looked older than both of us combined. "I didn't bring you up here just to feed you bourbon and trauma," he said, cheeks pink. "I wanted to photograph you with the mountains behind you. You look, Jonah, you look like something I want to remember on days when the world feels too loud." I laughed, embarrassed and pleased. "You're ridiculous. I'm serious. Just walk around. Touch the rocks. Look at the view. Pretend I'm not here." He spent the next 20 minutes directing me softly. "Turn your face to the light. Yes, like that. Chin down a little. Perfect." The shutter clicked like a heartbeat. I forgot to be shy. I felt mythic up there, wind tearing my hair. Ilias's voice wrapping around me like another blanket. Eventually, he set the camera down and walked over. cupped my cold cheeks in his warmer hands. "I'm falling for you," he said. "Simple as directions to the highway. I know it's only our second date, and I know that's insane. But I'm 34, and I'm tired of pretending I don't know what this feels like." My heart was a bird beating against my ribs. I was falling somewhere around the second pane au chocolat. He kissed me then, slow and deliberate, like he was memorizing the shape of my mouth against the shape of the mountains. When we pulled apart, the sun was lower, painting everything bronze. On the hike down, he held my hand the whole way. Halfway to the car, he stopped, pressed me gently against a tree, and kissed me again, deeper this time, until my knees forgot their job. Later, driving back with the playlist on shuffle and the windows cracked just enough for the cold to keep us awake, he reached over and laced our fingers on the gear shift. "Stay over tonight?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "And tomorrow night, and maybe the one after that." He smiled like a man who'd just got exactly what he came for. And the Subaru carried us down the mountain, toward whatever came, toward home. The lens of Elise's camera made the world feel softer, slower. I was sitting on the edge of a weathered picnic table at the overlook on Mount Tabor, legs dangling, late October lights spilling gold across the city below us. Portland shimmered in the distance like a promise. Elias had been photographing me for the better part of an hour. Quiet instructions. Gentle teasing when I tried to pose too stiffly. "Stop performing," he'd said, voice low. "Just be here with me." Something about being seen by him really seen-o raveled me in the best way. I felt held even from 10 feet away. "Your turn," I said finally, reaching for the camera. My fingers brushed his as he handed it over, reluctant. Cheeks pink. "I'm not photogenic," he warned. Liar. I spent the next 20 minutes chasing the way the wind moved through his auburn curls, the way his hazel eyes caught the sun like sea glass, the small, private smile he gave when he thought I wasn't looking. He pretended to protest, but I could tell he liked it, liked being the center of my attention, the way I'd been his. "Okay, enough," he laughed, reaching for the camera. "We're going to run out of space, and I still need proof this day happened." "One more," I said. I balanced the camera on a flat rock, set the timer, and tugged him close. First shot, both of us grinning like idiots at the lens. Second, he turned and kissed my temple just as the shutter clicked. Third, I turned too, and our mouths met, soft, unhurried, perfect. When we checked the photos later, that last one stopped my heart. Just our silhouettes against a rose and gold sky, a whole city a footnote beneath us. The afternoon stretched like taffy. We talked about everything and nothing, our worst childhood haircuts, professors who changed us, the cities we'd left pieces of ourselves in. Elias told me about coming out at 19. How his older brother had punched a hole in the drywall and didn't speak to him for a year. How his mom left Bible verses on his pillow for months, till one day she just asked if he wanted Thai food for dinner, like nothing had changed. How his little sister still sent him TikToks that said, "You're my favorite gay" in the caption. "We're okay now," he said quietly, rolling a smooth stone between his fingers. It took years, therapy, a lot of screaming. But he was at my gallery opening last month. Bought the most expensive print just to prove a point? He laughed, but it cracked in the middle. Progress is messy. I told him about my dad leaving when I was 9, how I still flinch when doors slam. How I'd spent most of my 20s trying not to need anyone so I couldn't be left again. He listened like it mattered. Like I mattered. As the sun dipped, Elias stood and offered his hand. "One more thing before we go." He led me to a quiet corner of the ridge where someone years ago had started stacking stones. Now, there were dozens, some careful, some drunkenly crooked little altars to wishes no one would ever say out loud. "People build them here," he said. "Leave something behind. Make a promise to the mountain, I guess." He crouched, brushing dirt from a flat shard of basalt. I thought, maybe we could make one together. The gesture undid me. We worked in silence, choosing stones that felt right, balancing them like we were building something that could outlast us. When we finished, our cairn stood steady and small in ours wish. I asked. He shook his head. "Secret." Then softer. "But it's about more days like this. More you. I swallowed hard. Same. The hike down was slow, both of us dragging our feet. By the time we reached his Jeep, the air had teeth. He cranked the heat, and I slid my hand onto his thigh without thinking. His came down over mine like it belonged there. Hungry? He asked as we wound back toward the city. Starving. He took me to a tiny Eritrean place in Northeast he swore had the best shiro in the Pacific Northwest. We sat in Etoni at a corner table, tearing pieces of Indra, feeding each other bites and laughing when the spice made my eyes water. He watched me like I was the only thing in the room worth looking at. Over thick coffee brewed in a jebana. He set his cup down and reached for both my hands. Can I say something that might be too much? My pulse stuttered. Always, I'm falling for you, Jonah. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled in mine, stupid fast. Like zero chill. And I know it's only been a couple weeks and I'm supposed to play it cool, but I don't want to lie to you. You feel like the thing I didn't know I was allowed to want. The air left my lungs. I squeezed his fingers. I'm falling too, I said. Rough. And it scares the hell out of me because I'm really good at losing people. But with you, it doesn't feel like falling. It feels like arriving. His eyes went bright and glassy. Yeah, he whispered. Exactly that. We walked back to his car through the hum of Alberta street neon signs. Buskers' drunk laughter spilling from bars, but it all blurred. He stopped under a street lamp and kissed me slow and deliberate, like he was memorizing the shape of my mouth. Come home with me? He asked against my lips, then rushed. Just to talk, I swear, or not talk. Whatever you, I kissed him quiet. Take me home, Elias. His apartment was on the top floor of an old warehouse in the pearl brick walls. Pipes overhead, books in chaotic piles like they'd bred while he wasn't looking. Plants fought for window space. A half-finished painting leaned against the couch. All violent blues and golds. Sorry, he said, kicking a stack of mail under the coffee table. I wasn't planning on company. It's perfect, I said, and meant it. He made tikka me a meal with too much honey and we curled up on his couch. My legs across his lap, his thumb tracing circles on my ankle. We talked until the city quieted outside. About fears. About the future. About whether love could ever really be safe. When I finally glanced at the clock and sighed, he caught my wrist. Stay. Beat. I have a very comfortable couch. Or, the bed's big enough for two if you just want to sleep. I don't want you taking a rideshare this late, and I'm too tired to drive. There's no pressure in it. Just care I'll stay, said. He lent me an old Reed College t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants I had to roll 4 times at the waist. We brushed our teeth side by side, trading toothpaste and shy smiles in the mirror like we'd done it forever. His bed was low to the ground, drowned in blankets. We climbed in from opposite sides, awkward for about 10 seconds, until he opened his arm, and I went to him without hesitation. My head on his chest, his heartbeat under my ear, his fingers in my hair. This okay? He murmured. Better than okay? Just before I drifted off, he pressed a kiss to my temple. Sweet dreams, Jonah. Sweet dreams, Eli. I woke sometime after 3 to find we'd shifted in our sleep. I was curled behind him, arm locked around his waist, nose against the warm nape of his neck. He smelled like cedar and paint and safety. When I tightened my hold, he made a small, contented sound and pulled my hand up to rest over his heart. You still here? He asked, voice gravel and sleep. Still here. Good. Fell back asleep with his fingers laced through mine and didn't dream of burning. Buildings or empty houses for the first time in years. The next month was a series of small miracles. Mornings where he'd bring me coffee in bed and kiss the sleep from my eyes. Nights I'd fall asleep on his couch waiting for him to finish at the gallery, waking to find he'd carried me to bed. Weekends spent hiking the gorge or thrifting weird art for his already overcrowded walls. I redesigned his gallery's branding, something bold and alive that made him tear up, when I showed him the final files. We were careful at first, both of us carrying scar tissue from people who'd promised forever and then vanished. But caution only lasts so long when someone looks at you like you hung the moon. It was my best friend Simone who finally cornered me. "You're in love with him," she said flatly over brunch. Stealing a bite of my French toast. "When are you telling him, coward?" "It's been 5 weeks, Sim. And I knew I was marrying Donnie after 3 dates. Time is a construct. I'm scared," I admitted. "Saying it makes it real. Real things can be lost." She softened. "Sweetheart, the only thing worse than losing it is never having it at all." So I carried the words around like a secret heartbeat for days, waiting for the right moment. It came on a rainy Thursday. Ilias had promised to cook homemade tagliatelle with mushrooms he'd foraged himself because, of course, he foraged. I let myself in with the key he'd given me the week before and found him in a cloud of steam. Swearing at a pot of boiling water, hair tied back with a paintbrush. "I maybe underestimated fresh pasta," he said. Turning with flour on his cheek, I kissed the flour away. "We'll fix it together." We did. Somehow, the pasta didn't disintegrate. The sauce was perfect. And we ate cross-legged on his living room floor because the table was covered in framing supplies. Halfway through the bottle of wine, he set his plate down and looked at Morelli. Looked like he was working up the courage to jump off something high. "Jonah," he started, then stopped. Took my hand. "I need to ask you something, and I'm kind of terrified." "Okay. Where do you see this going?" "Us. Because He exhaled hard. "I don't want to scare you off, but I need to know if I'm allowed to hope for keeps." The words I'd been carrying for weeks broke free. "Elias," I said, voice shaking, "I'm already there. I'm in love with you. Completely. Terrifyingly. And I don't want to be anywhere else." The sound he made was half laugh, half sob. He pulled me into his lap, buried his face in my neck. "I love you too," he whispered against my skin. "So much it's stupid." "I love you, Jonah." Stayed there on the floor for a long time, trading kisses that tasted like wine and mushrooms in relief, the rain drumming on the windows like it was celebrating with us. Later, tangled in his sheets, city lights striping the ceiling, he traced the line of my shoulder and said, quiet and certain, "This is the beginning, okay? Not the middle. Not the end. The beginning." I pressed my face into his chest and believed him. For the first time in my life, I believed someone when they promised to stay. We met on a rainy Thursday in Seattle, in a cramped independent record store tucked between a vegan donut shop and a vintage clothing boutique in Capitol Hill. I was 29. Newly single after a breakup that had left me convinced I was better at loving fictional characters than real people. My name is Elias Quinn, and I was killing time. Flipping through vinyl in the jazz section because I liked the album covers more than I liked jazz. He was behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, tattooed forearms restocking a shelf of rare Soul 45s, dark hair that kept falling into his eyes, a crooked smile he probably wasn't even aware he had, and a voice like smoke when he asked if I needed help finding anything. His name was Julian Vale. He owned the place, Blue Note and Groove. I told him I was just browsing. He said, "Good. Browsing is underrated. Commit to nothing. Regret nothing." Then he handed me a record Chet Baker, My Funny Valentine, and said, "But maybe commit to this one. It's heartbroken in the best way." I bought it even though I didn't own a record player. I came back the next week. And the week after that, I started bringing him coffee black, no sugar, 2 shots of espresso, because I'd watched him make one for himself and memorized it. He started setting aside records he thought I'd like. We talked about music like it was religion. He loved Motown and Northern Soul. I pretended I knew more than I did about Coltrane and Billie Holiday just to keep him talking. One night he closed the shop late and put on Nina Simone's I Put a Spell on You. The store was empty except for us and the rain against the windows. He asked if I wanted to dance. I said I had 2 left feet. He said, "Perfect. I've got 2 right ones. We'll balance." We slow danced between the aisles, his hand warm on the small of my back, my cheek against his shoulder. Nina singing about being lost and found all at once. When the song ended, neither of us moved. He whispered, "I close in 10 minutes. There's a bar 2 blocks down that has a great old jukebox and terrible lighting. Come with me? I said yes, before my brain caught up with my mouth. That was our first date cheap beer, a jukebox that only played songs from the 60s and 70s, and the kind of conversation that made ours feel like minutes. He told me about growing up in Tacoma, about his dad who'd walked out when he was 12, about how music had raised him more than any person ever had. I told him about growing up in a small town in eastern Washington where being gay meant being invisible or being a target, and how I'd left the day I turned 18 and never looked back at the end of the night. He walked me to my bus stop in the rain. We stood under the awning, soaked anyway, and he kissed me like he'd been waiting years to do it. Soft at first, then deeper, like he was trying to say everything he hadn't found words for. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine and said, "I don't do this. I don't fall like this." "But Elias, I'm already falling," I whispered. "Good. Catch me." We didn't waste time after that. We spent every night together, some at his loft above the shop, some at my tiny studio in Fremont. We cooked terrible attempts at risotto and danced in socked feet to Aretha Franklin. We made out on his couch like teenagers until our lips were swollen and our shirts were lost somewhere on the floor. We never rushed past that. There was something sacred about the slowness, about learning each other's bodies the way you learn a song note by note, breath by breath. One night, 3 months in, we were lying in his bed, city lights striping the ceiling through half-closed blinds. He was tracing circles on my chest with his fingertip, quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What do you want from this?" From us? The question hit me like cold water. I turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" He took a shaky breath. "I'm in love with you, Elias. I've been in love with you for weeks, and it's scaring the hell out of me because I don't know if you're here for something real or if this is just easy, fun, temporary, and I can't do temporary with you. Not anymore." My heart was trying to climb out of my throat. I sat up, took his face in my hands, and said, "Julian, I'm terrified because I've never felt this before. I love the way you hum off-key when you think I'm not listening. I love how you know every lyric to every song from 1968 but can't remember where you parked your car. I love how you make me feel like I'm allowed to take up space. I'm in love with you, and I'm not going anywhere." He laughed through the tears that had started, falling, and kissed me like the world was ending and beginning at the same time. A week later, tangled in sheets and dawn light, he asked me to move in. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to God. I wanted to, but because everything good in my life had always come with an expiration date. I told him I was scared we'd burn too bright too fast. He listened, really listened, and then said, "Okay, not yet, but leave a toothbrush. Leave a drawer. Leave pieces of yourself here until there's no room left for doubt." So I did. Slowly, surely, my life migrated across the city. My records joined his. My coffee mug lived next to his. My side of the bed became permanent. Thanksgiving came. He wanted me to meet his mom and his younger sister in Tacoma. His mom hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe and immediately showed me embarrassing photos of Julian with braces and a bowl cut. His sister, Leonon Benaire, sharp-tongued, fiercely protective, pulled me aside and said he used to play sad songs on repeat for months after every breakup. "I haven't heard a sad song in his apartment since he met you." Don't hurt him. Promised I wouldn't. His mom asked if we were serious. Julian reached for my hand under the table and said, "He's it for me." I almost did. Winter was hard. The shop struggled. Online retailers, rising rent, foot traffic down after the holidays. Julian stopped sleeping. I'd find him at 3 a.m. staring at spreadsheets, eyes bloodshot. He wouldn't take my money, wouldn't let me help financially. "This is mine to fix," he'd say. But one night, I closed his laptop, climbed into his lap, and said, "You don't get to carry the world alone anymore. That's not how this works." We redid the website together. I designed new, branding clean, warm, nostalgic but modern. We started vinyl listening nights, brought in local DJs, hosted album release parties. Slowly, people came back. The shop breathed again. Spring came, and with it, the question again. Move in. For real this time. I looked around the loft, my plants on the windowsill. Our books stacked sideways because we'd run out of shelf space. The framed photo of us laughing in the rain on the night he kissed me at the bus stop. Yes, I said. God, yes. Moving in was chaos and joy. We painted the bedroom a deep forest green at 2 a.m. because we couldn't wait until morning. We argued over whose turn it was to take out the recycling and made up on the kitchen floor. We adopted a one-eyed cat named Coltrane who hated everyone except us. 1 year to the day after we met, Julian took me back to Blue Note and Groove after closing. The lights were low, fairy lights strung between the shelves. He'd set up a record player in the middle of the floor. Playing the first song we ever danced to, Nina Simone, he handed me a photo album our first year together in pictures. Dancing in the shop. Kissing in the rain. Christmas morning in ugly sweaters. The last page had a photo of us from the week before, asleep on the couch, Coltrane on my chest, Julian's arm around me. Underneath, in his handwriting, "Will you marry me?" He was already on one knee. I couldn't speak. I just pulled him up and kissed him through tears and said yes about 100 times. The wedding was small. 30 people in a rented mid-century house on Bainbridge Island, surrounded by water and evergreens. My sister flew in from New York and cried through the whole ceremony. Julian's mom walked him down the aisle to an instrumental version of Ain't No Mountain High Enough. We wrote our own vows. His made me sob. Mine made him sob harder. When we kissed as husbands. The cheers were so loud, the windows shook. His mom gave a speech that ended with, "I always knew my son would love fiercely." I just didn't know how beautiful it would be to watch. We honeymooned in New Orleans jazz clubs, beignets at midnight. Making love in a hotel with a balcony overlooking the Mississippi. We came home sun-browned and happy, and more in love than ever. 3 years later, on another rainy Thursday, we walked back into Blue Note and Groove for our anniversary ritual. Same corner booth we'd claimed on our first date at the bar down the street. Same drinks. Same song on the shop speakers. Julian pulled out the photo album, now thick with memories. Our wedding. Our first house, a little blue bungalow in Ballard. The trip to Japan where we got lost in Tokyo record stores for days. The quiet Tuesdays where nothing happened except coffee and kissing and being stupidly, perfectly in love. He laced his fingers through mine across the table. Still the best decision I ever made, said. Catching you staring at me over the jazz vinyl. Letting myself be caught and outside. The Seattle rain kept falling, soft and steady. Like it had been there all along, witnessing, waiting, knowing we'd find our way here, to this life, to this love, to this beautiful, ordinary, extraordinary, forever.